Hey everyone, this is Scott from Norebbo.com, and I'm going to show you how I recently illustrated a Korean Air Airbus A220-300. Now, on first glance, this would seem like a very simple livery, and I agree that for the most part it was. However, there are certain parts of it that are somewhat complicated, and as you'll see in a moment, it just took a lot of time, and it was not really what I was expecting. But anyway, I'll get to that in a moment. I've got my Airbus A220 template here that I created, and I'm just laying down the basic color. I've got the blue top there and the silver stripe. I'm working in Adobe Photoshop right now. No need to go to Adobe Illustrator yet because this is just a simple livery. I mean, you've got the straight horizontal lines that go down the side of the fuselage. Really simple, no issues yet, but it's going to get complicated here, as I said. Adding in some winglet color there. And yeah, so this is where it gets a little bit gnarly. So the Korean Air titles are, it was a challenge. And as I always say in my videos, there are vector versions of this out there on the internet, and you can go grab those if you want. And you can cheat. You can use somebody else's work. But I always like to do everything from scratch, so I just tried to find the highest resolution version of the Korean Air titles and the logo as I could, and then I just brought that image into Adobe Illustrator. I mean, you can use any vector program. It doesn't really matter. Illustrator is what I know. It's what I've been using for years, so that's what I use. And I just used the pen tool to trace around the edges and create the basic shapes. I thought this was going to take 10 minutes, but it probably took, I don't know, maybe 25, 30 minutes when it was all said and done, which was actually longer than it took to illustrate the Korean Air livery as a whole. So let that be a warning if the Korean Air livery is something that you want to illustrate for yourself. It's good practice, though, because it's a simple livery. I mean, I'm talking about the base livery with the color palette with the silver and the blue, and that'll give you the confidence you need to, at least make some progress. If you're not very familiar with creating airliner art, if you don't have a lot of experience, it's a good livery to start with because it's easy to lay down that basic color, and then as you build confidence from doing that, then you can go in and attempt to trace the Korean Air titles like I'm doing. And if that's if that's too much for you, you can go on the internet and you can find vector versions of this that already exist. And actually, I think on the Wikipedia page for Korean Air, there's a vector or at least a high resolution PNG of this logo. So you don't actually even have to trace it. But as I always say, it's better to create your own graphics and do your own thing so the illustration is truly yours. So yeah, so I'm almost done here. There are some duplicate letters in the Korean Air titles, so I was able to save some time there. Now I'm just working on the yin and yang portion of this, which is actually quite complicated as well because it's not exactly symmetrical, or at least the version that I'm tracing here wasn't exactly symmetrical. So I don't know if this was the original logo or if this is just somebody's sloppy work. But whatever, I used some creative license here, and I tried to clean it up and make it a little bit more symmetrical than what I was tracing. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's good enough. So yeah, I've got the vector shapes drawn, just cutting out the holes and adding in some color there, and now I've got my vector Korean Air titles. And now I'm back in Photoshop, going to place that over top of the fuselage, a word I can't say. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. And something you have to do when you place these titles over top of a fuselage, remember that the body of the aircraft itself is a cylinder, and that top section is actually fading away from you. So you actually have to scale down the titles vertically so that it looks a little bit smushed. It doesn't make sense, but just remember, if you remember that the fuselage is just a cylinder and it's not exactly flat, so you're not looking at it completely side on, it seems to make a little bit more sense. And you'll understand that once you start placing these titles over top of aircraft templates such as this. So yeah, just using my vector elements now to place the logos on the different parts of the aircraft. And what you saw me doing there was I just added a stroke within Photoshop. So these are vector shapes that I imported from Adobe Illustrator, and then I'm using the stroke tool and sometimes even the fill tool within Photoshop to adjust the colors, just to make some minor adjustments. You know, it's not entirely accurate. Sometimes you got to make some tweaks that helps to make the illustration or the or whatever it is that you're creating just pop a little bit more, and that's okay. You know, you don't have to be exact. And I mean, if you look at the photo above, the lighting is different from what I have on my A220 template below. So you just kind of have to find the right balance when it comes to, you know, highlights and gloss and that sort of thing. So now I am using my Airbus font to recreate the Airbus A220-300 label or graphics for the rear fuselage there. And that's a font that you can actually get on Google. It's out there. Just do a search. It's free. It's available. And, you know, it's just little details like that which is going to make your illustration pop. And it's worth taking the time to get all that stuff right and looking correct, which is a good segue into what I'm doing now, which is adding the nose gear graphics. It's really important just to get all that looking good. And finally, I'm going to add some gloss here to the entire fuselage, or to the entire aircraft. And it's just a simple process. Just create a shape that cuts right down the middle of the side of the aircraft. Do a downward gradient in black and an upward gradient in white, and fade it back a little bit, and then it's instant gloss. It just looks amazing, and it's just little details like that which is going to make your illustration pop. And for me, it's the favorite part of doing the entire illustration. I cannot wait to get to that part, because it's, you know, no matter how bad I'm feeling about the illustration, you know, if I'm feeling good about it, bad about it, it doesn't matter. I'm always going to feel good about it after I add that gloss, just because it helps so much to make it look like a real aircraft, or you know, something really, really juicy. So yeah, there you have it. Relatively simple design, the Korean Air livery, but it's just the Korean Air titles which is going to take the most time if you want to recreate this for yourself. But anyway, yeah, so I thought it was going to be neat to show you something that was seemingly simple, but not really. And if you're just getting started with airline livery design, just remember that there's always going to be things that pop up that are going to be harder than you were expecting. And that's okay. It just, you know, with experience, you'll get better. You just got to work through that stuff. And then soon it won't be that much of a challenge at all. So anyway, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. If you want this template, or at least the free JPEG version of it, you can get it on my website, Norebbo.com. Link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.